Okay, we are back live. In the next presentation, we have Matt Reiners and Dr. Diana Sowers from Eversound. We're going to talk about the silent epidemic, and I'll let them talk to you about that. But first, a little housekeeping. Down the bottom, we have the Q&A there. We have the chat. In the chat, anything, it's been going, perfectly well. Everybody just throwing their comments in the chat, and we're having a good conversation going there. But if you want to ask us a question specifically about the presentation, put it in the Q&A so we make sure we see that. And then I'll turn it over to Steve for last little bit, and then we'll hear from Matt and Diana.
Hey guys, I am so glad to do this. Hearing is, I know you're going to talk about this, but as we get older, our hearing decreases. As by decades, I guess I'm the oldest person on this four screens, right? And I'm noticing that I just don't hear. I need people to talk a little bit louder. I don't know why voices are fading that they didn't used to be. People just don't talk as loud as they used to, right? So this hearing thing is a huge challenge in senior living. I'm really excited to have you here. A couple of quick things. We're doing chats. Person with the most chats each day gets a $100 Amazon gift card. We had a little technical difficulty, so we'll get that out. Hopefully announce that on Foresight TV tomorrow. And we'll obviously, you don't have to be there in order to know you win. We'll make sure you'll learn about that, and be sure and rate the speakers. We just saw the barcode, so I'll put it up. I will put the link into the chat here as Matt and Diana are getting started, and we're delighted to have you here. So why don't you guys introduce yourself, or however you'd like to do that best, and Dave and I will exit the stage.
Thanks,
Sounds
guys.
great. Diana, you want to go first?
Sure. So Matt and I are here to talk on behalf of our company Eversound regarding hearing loss. I'm Dr. Diana Sowers. I'm an audiologist with 25 years of experience. I'm the kind of professional that's been there, done that, seen it all. And now my expertise is in the area of our treasured patients that are in their senior years. Matt?
Awesome. And my name is Matt Reiners. I'm one of the co-founders of Eversound. And, it's really set on a mission to try and improve quality of life for older adults by giving them the gift of hearing. And feel super fortunate to be here with you today to talk about hearing loss and how that impacts your prospects. So we will be monitoring the chat. So if questions do come up, I'll try and get to a point that we can, answer those on the fly, or of course, get to those at the end. What we're hoping to kind of just cover here today is just some of our learning objectives. So understand the impact of hearing loss for some of your residents, explore the association between hearing loss and cognitive burden, understand the different stages of hearing loss and how that impacts cognitive function, identify potential impact of untreated hearing loss, indirect health, psychosocial well-being, and overall quality of life, and then learn ways to provide help for residents living with hearing loss and having your community stand apart. So I will pass it off to Dr. Sowers here, who is the true expert on this call. And Diana, feel free to just yell at me if you need me to change slides, and we can make it happen.
Awesome. I wanted to take just a second to thank everybody for inviting us here. Matt and I are both very passionate about helping people with hearing loss and how hearing care can impact the people that we love. And I do want to apologize. I'm going to seem kind of like the bad guy and the Debbie Downer for a lot of this part of the presentation, because some of these facts are mind-blowing. And even to me, after being in the hearing care field for over 25 years, it can be a little frustrating to hear some of this information, but we'll give you some bright sides and better points on what to do with this data that we're getting. So bear with me as we get through some of this information. I think that it's really important to start out with an understanding of how common hearing loss is, especially for our seniors. And, most people that have hearing loss are really working their tushies off to hide it. So it really, truly is a silent epidemic that we're experiencing. There's even some studies out there that show people that are living and working in communities under-identify hearing loss that's present. So when you look at this graph and you see that climbing scale as it grows based on the older you are, the more hearing loss is present. Take a look at the statistic, and some of the things I'm going to tell you, I'm going to earmark, pun intended, as take-home facts that you should bring along with you. And one of those is this: 8 out of 10 of people over the age of 80 experience some degree of meaningful hearing loss. So what that means is meaningful hearing loss, right at that mild to moderate range of hearing loss, is where treatment is recommended. So when these patients are recommended this level of treatment, not every one of them accepts that plan, just like the rest of us when our doctors say, you really should do this, it's good for you. Approximately 1 out of 5 in this group could benefit from hearing aids, are currently using them. So that's a very small percentage that are getting the help that they need. Go ahead to the next slide for me, Matt. So let's talk about how do you know when somebody has hearing loss? It often takes somebody else to point it out to you. Again, hearing loss is something that gradually will creep up on you. And as we slowly develop this hearing loss, we're not always aware of it. I often joke with my patients and tell them it's like boiling a lobster. You throw it in the pot, you turn the heat on, the poor thing doesn't know it's getting cooked. Those that experience this gradual increase in hearing loss don't always know it's happening until it's pointed out. A lot of my patients will say that it takes a loved one to tell them something is wrong. Oftentimes it happens while watching television. An adult child will walk in the room and turn the TV volume down to a level that's more appropriate. And that's when they have that light bulb moment of, wow, I really do notice this hearing loss. I had a patient many years ago. She was 92 and getting hearing aids for the first time. And at her follow-up appointment, I asked her, hey, how did it go with your hearing aids? And she said, yeah, everything was really great. My TV volume came down considerably. And as a young provider, I'm thinking, wow, this is the greatest news. I love hearing this. The funny part of the story is the lady told me 3 days after she had gotten her hearing aids, the neighbors came over to figure out what the heck was going on because they couldn't hear her television anymore. And again, I was thinking, yes, this is great. But my patient had told me at that point how angry and upset she was because she could have been lying on the floor for 3 days before her neighbors came to help her. But hearing loss means different things to different people. Here are some common signs of what hearing loss is, and I'm sure you've already read the slide along with listening to my funny stories. So go ahead, Matt, let's go to the next slide. There's a lot more to watch for in a hearing loss beyond just saying huh or what to identify that loss is present. Some of the changes that you'll want to watch for within your communities include mental changes, changes in mood, and even changes in socialization patterns or activity levels. Watch for avoidance, arguments, aggression. Those are some key things to keep on your radar. Remember, 8 out of 10 of your residents over the age of 80 may be showing some of these signs, and you need to be actively looking for these signs. Even more important, is your community providing a solution when you see this problem exists? Can your staff identify residents that have these signs and point them in the right direction for appropriate care? So now we've tackled a few things. We know there's a lot of people that are experiencing this issue, 8 out of 10 over the age of 80. We also know the certain signs of hearing loss that are present. So right now I'm going to pause and ask if there's any questions in the chat, anybody that needs any further clarification on where we're headed with this conversation. I see the chat numbers at 4. Matt, did you catch anything?
Nope, you're good. It was just more housekeeping stuff. So you're good.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
So then we're going to move on. This is where we're going to be wearing our smarty pants. We're going to talk a little bit. Go back one. There we go.
Yep.
We're going to talk a little bit about how the brain interacts with hearing loss and what this means for people that are advancing in their years. So hearing loss goes beyond just trouble with your hearing. This is where we're going to put the pieces together and view a more comprehensive picture of what is happening when the brain begins to show signs of being compromised. So down at the very bottom of the slide, you see the tiny blue writing. It talks about Dr. Lin, who did some research in this. He's very prominent in the field of hearing and brain-related research. Also, Lancet Commission study is one of the other areas that will go into more detail, both wonderful and engaging reads about hearing loss and brain activity. But one of the things that they both talk about is cognitive load, along with the brain structure itself beginning to shrink, and how social isolation can all create this perfect storm for increased risk for dementia and accelerated cognitive decline. We already expect some level of cognitive decline as we age, but the key word in this is accelerated, and nobody wants to have that accelerated decline. And it's the hearing impairment that's putting the foot on the gas. First thing we need to understand a little bit more about is what cognitive load means when it's connected to hearing loss. We all know what cognitive load is. It's kind of how we get stressed out from having too many things going on at once, and our brains kind of have this moment when it comes to that cognitive load. But how hearing loss impacts that is a little bit different. When you have this path between your ear and your brain that starts to have signs of damage and distortion, that signal getting from ear to brain is unclear. Our brain has to work a lot harder to not only hear and receive that signal, it has to interpret what that signal means. And when that signal is not correct coming in, we're also dealing with an atrophied brain. Basically, our brains are working twice as hard to hear half as much, and they begin to run out of gas. So the brain itself, not only is the hearing loss accelerating our loss of brain power, that hearing loss will deprive the gas tank. When the gas tank runs on empty, we're not able to put our energy and efforts towards other functions that the brain should be doing, such as memory and attention span. Researchers are noticing too that this is happening at a faster rate, specifically in the temporal lobe on the side of your brain. And this is where that shrinkage is due to lack of stimulation. So let's think about how our brain is stimulated by sound. If you imagine yourself sitting quietly at your desk, or better yet, let's go to a beach. Okay, we're going to sit on the beach and listen to what's going on around us. We may not be actively listening, but we're still stimulating our brain. The waves are crashing, and that's a sound. We hear kids playing on at a distance. We hear birds arguing about what they're going to eat. All of these sounds are providing a stimulus to our brain, keeping it active, healthy, and happy. But once we start to have hearing loss, that stimulus becomes distorted, it becomes less often, and it becomes muted and weaker. And that contributes to the atrophy of our brain. If we can continue to stimulate our brain, now we're getting more of that message through. And Matt's going to talk about some of the ways to do that when he gets to his portion. But this is what cognitive load and shrinking brain can do to contribute to dementia in our population. Hearing loss also impacts, hold on, we're not there yet. Hearing loss also impacts the quality of a person's social life. And this is kind of low-hanging fruit. We kind of identify that if you can't hear, you can't communicate, and your social activities get lower. But this one's too easy to identify for our group, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But it's harder to identify that cognitive load and that shrinkage of brain because we don't really get the opportunity to measure those things. Go ahead, ma'am. So there are studies that have been out that are, in excess of 25 years ago that have associated hearing loss with the likelihood of getting dementia. So this isn't new information, but there is a statistic that I want you to take home from this slide, and it's that mild hearing loss can double your risk for dementia. So this is another super statistic to put in your wheelhouse. So 8 out of 10. Over the age of 80, and you double your risk for dementia when hearing loss is only mild. Many of my patients that have mild hearing loss really are not ready to pursue treatment, but this is where their behavior patterns begin. When mild hearing loss is present, we start to see those signs of people choosing to miss out on activities that they once enjoyed because it's become too difficult for them to hear and participate. Not everybody is ready to invest in treating their hearing loss. but everyone can benefit from taking steps in moving forward with addressing this issue. Go ahead on to the next slide for me, Matt. So imagine the quality of life of the residents that you work with in senior care. There are some things that they can control and some things that they can't, but being passive about hearing loss and accepting that it is just part of the aging process can truly threaten their quality of life. So when you look at these icons that are on the screen in front of you, it kind of simplifies the beginning of a downward spiral towards poorer health. What you're not seeing on this slide is the potential for these health issues to develop into other comorbidities that create residents who need more care. When care levels are increased, so is the cost of treating for these patients. Next slide for me, Matt. So of course, we really do care about how the patients and the residents are affected by all of this, but as folks that work in a senior living community, you should also be affected or concerned about how your bottom line is affected when it comes to this. There's an increased mortality rate when it comes to not treating hearing loss. Now, the World Health Organization did a study on social engagement patterns and subjective well-being of older adults. These results indicated that social engagement has a positive impact on mental health, physical activity, and a lowered risk of mortality. People with untreated hearing loss have less social interactions with their family, and there's even a special term to describe this. It's called exclusion from communication. And basically what that means is families are making active choices on whether or not to have a conversation with their hearing impaired loved one because it might be too difficult either on the giving end of that conversation or the receiving end of that conversation. And this reduces social interactions even further. When you have an increased mortality rate, this is going to create more open beds in your communities. This is potentially going to create issues of inviting new residents into your communities with new routines, new behaviors, and then increased staff training opportunities to accommodate these new residents. And it's probably far less cheaper to keep the residents that you have healthy and happy than it is to establish new routines with new residents and staff training. In addition to increased mortality, untreated hearing loss will impact the quality of life and overall health of your residents. There's a lot of comorbidities that can be associated with untreated hearing loss, including the ones from the previous slide, which were dementia, increased risk for falling, and reduced physical activity. But with that comes potential for weight gain, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, increased arthritis and joint pain, increased mental health concerns, including anxiety, depression, agitation, and aggression. So these changes can increase the level of skill and care that is needed. More health demands means a loss of independence for many of these people too. On a positive note, if you do address hearing loss and offer options for your residents, they are more likely to be engaged in multiple activities. And not only is this good for them, it's good for your community, because by increasing that level of engagement, your residents will want to stay there. Not only will it decrease their mortality rate, it increases their happiness because they're involved in a positive experience. Before we go on to the next slide, I want to check on the chat with you, Matt. Are there any questions?
You're good.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I think it's really important that we take just a minute to address how untreated hearing loss not only affects the residents themselves and your bottom line, it affects your staff. A lot of communities that I'm going into, and I go to them in different parts of the country virtually to provide services for our patients, the one thing that seems to be consistent coming from the residents is a complaint that they are short of staff. Less staff is less help, and that's hard on the residents. One of the common things that I've seen when I've gone to visit in those residences are bingo. Bingo is pretty common, and I see staff jumping from card to card to card, quickly trying to put the chips on the cards because the residents aren't hearing. They're just kind of there, not fully engaged and participating. It's nice to see the staff do this as part of their effort, but it's a whole lot of work. And I wish they were working smarter and not harder when it comes to this. I also refer to this as the illusion of engagement. And I'm wondering who's really playing this bingo game. It's certainly not the people that are just sitting there not hearing the numbers called or putting the chips on their cards. Other issues that are presented by patients with untreated hearing loss include an increased rate of hospitalization, both in the frequency of getting admitted, but also the length of stay. There's also a reduced level of privacy that's involved, since people need to raise their voices within their community to communicate with the patients. There is an increased risk of safety at home and also outside of the community. And this other underlying issue of reduced independence. And this affects your staff too. The risk of becoming dependent upon others is increased by 28% when hearing loss is untreated. One of the things that I find when I talk with my patients that do have hearing loss, and I do offer some level of treatment, the things that motivate them the most are their independence and continuing to facilitate their own independence, and the risk for having the comorbidities of hearing loss. Hearing loss itself doesn't seem to bother a lot of folks, but things that go along with it, dementia, risk of falling, and this loss of independence is a big deal. When mental health issues escalate, residents become more needy for time. Residents with anxiety will often need to have their hand held by staff as a one-on-one interaction to get them through an activity. Residents that have depression need a lot more interaction from staff to be convinced to participate in an activity. Residents that have mood changes, including aggression, may put your staff at risk for physical assault. And when this happens, your community is certainly liable for having additional training offered to staff on how to handle these types of behaviors and issues that occur. All of this puts your staff at risk for burnout. And that's a big deal in our world today, not just in communities, but every employer is looking at burnout and trying to retain their staff. Staff can suffer from increased cognitive load too, and this means the potential for increased errors in documentation and providing medical care. This adds to an increased risk of higher turnover and just general unhappiness in employment overall. And nobody wants to have that. Happy, healthy staff work harder, do more. And if you can retain them, they're a better value to you. Next
Awesome.
one.
Thank you, Dr. Sowers. We only have like 3 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we get to
Go ahead and skip my
here.
slide and then head on to yours.
Cool. And so I think Dr. Sowers summed it up great. I love some of the takeaway stats that you shared. And this is why really Eversound was created. It was to help people that, were struggling to hear. This is what I heard with my grandmother, who would never leave her room because she couldn't hear. She would not engage in those social programs. It's really set us on a mission to create a system to help, because as Diana had said, 1 in 5 people that are benefit from a hearing aid are actually using one. So we've created a system that really just helps to level the playing field and create a tool that's simple to use within senior living communities today. I won't go into the details of like how it actually works, but we're finding communities really using this across the board. So, thank you for the heads up here, Dave and Steve. So what's cool about the system is that people are using it for communication with staff, family visits, resident council meetings, religious services. It's never too late. PT and OT, prospect tours. I'll kind of go into that a little bit more because I know this is what your prospects are dealing with. But bingo, exercise, scenic rides, music, meditation, movies, sundowning, entertainers. So, think about those times if someone came into your community and are struggling to hear, struggling to participate. I've heard about how they might be on the tour, but they're kind of disengaged from that. And so, and I think one of the key points here, depending on the average age of your community, if it's above 80% of people that are coming in and visiting are probably living with some sort of hearing loss, and the adult children know that's a thing. And so what's really cool is what's really interesting is we're seeing more and more communities embrace this idea of accessibility and inclusion and really, leaning into helping those living with hearing loss. So a couple of the same community, two different stories here, which is basically saying that they're using Eversound on tours. Some of those coming in, they're still wearing masks, and if you're can't hear, you're usually reading lips. If people are wearing masks, it makes it that much more difficult. But on the person on the left eventually did move in. And then on the right, they had said that, Eversound's such an amazing tool. It can change lives. We just had another tour with a future resident whose hearing aids were broken, and Eversound helped to get the yes to move in. He's also excited about using the headphones during activities. So we see people using this all across the board in community life. And it's been really interesting to see how people have been using this on the prospect side. It's an easy way to differentiate and really speak to the majority of people that are coming into communities today. And so our friend Angel had said that they used the Eversound system on tour. The family canceled the rest of other scheduled tours in other locations and put a deposit down saying this will help mom be comfortable. And then our friend Kristen at Oakmont said, talk about an aha moment. We recently had a tour where the marketing director had to use raised voices to communicate. Quickly, another team member grabbed our Eversound headphone system with the touring prospect to use. Immediately changed the vibe and trajectory of the tour, definitely contributed to getting a deposit. And yes, I agree, Linda, with both comments there. We've got these awesome stories. We've also got some data to back it up. We did have a group do a 3-month study with 7 communities where they're looking at the control group that did not have Eversound and not using it on sales and marketing. And then we had a group, the 7 communities actually using it. And what they saw was a higher tour to move-in ratio and a higher, just more move-ins in general. And I think Becky Cummings, who was an adult child, summed it up best, saying the Eversound system is one of those benefits that appealed to me and contributed to my decision in choosing this community for my mother's home. I actually talked to Becky. She said Eversound was a prayer answered for her, and that it was just really powerful and really allowed her to reconnect with her mom on a whole other level. So in summary here, how can Eversound help your community? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Early mention of hearing care issues, climb a hill, not a mountain. Make your community accessible with the Eversound wireless headphone system. Be a leader, not a follower. And, just think about hearing loss in a new light here. So thank you for joining us. I'll give it back to our presenters here. Appreciate you letting us go a couple of minutes over, and I will stop talking.
Well, that was wonderful, and thank you. And I don't think, and Matt, what you just said was, I don't think the general public has made that connection. And thank you, Dr. Sowers, for that. I watched my own grandfather on my mom's side go through that. Hearing loss was the first thing, and it ended in dementia and isolation. And he sat over always in the chair in my parents' house in the living room, and that was like people got frustrated. You couldn't talk to him, he couldn't hear. So I'd never put that together before, and that mental load that hearing loss takes. So thank you for that. And look, anytime we have a win-win-win, I'm going to be the marketing guy now. That's a resident win, a community win, a staff win. But communities, even before you adopt this, if you're putting out thought leadership on healthcare decision-making, this has got to be in your website. You've got to educate, because I had no idea until this very minute that there was this connection there. And I bet you most people don't either. And I think you've got to get out there and be the thought leader about when it comes to those healthcare decisions, that this is a thing, and make this connection for people, because I didn't know. So anyway, Steve.
Nah, this is really good stuff. I think about my dad, who had really profound hearing loss by the time he passed away, and he denied it. He didn't do anything about it. He finally did get to hearing aids, but by the time he'd done it, it was really hard because his hearing loss was so profound. And if he'd had something like this in the interim, it would have been so much better. And, at the end of the day, this is really about making the lives of people better. The value proposition that senior living offers is to make the lives of older people better, right? And really to make the lives of family members better. And technology has given owners, operators the ability to do that more effectively. I mean, if you didn't have this, what else would you do? And I think that's sort of the way you sometimes have to look at these things, is you have to say, what did they do? Write things down, or people just suffered? And this is a way to take people from, frustration and misery to being able to do something really powerful. So this is good stuff.
Yeah,
Just two quick things. I dropped in. I'll do it again. Do your survey. There's the link if you want to do it there, or you can use the barcode. I'm going to pop up right now. Shoot that with your mobile device, and then you can pick your speaker. And it takes you about 30 seconds to do that. You should do it right now. Don't think, oh, I'll do it at the end of the event, because I promise you, you won't. Go do it right now. Give some love to Matt and Diana. And but we thank you guys for educating us.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. It was my pleasure to be here.
awesome. It was wonderful. Thank you all.
All
right.
right.
So up next, in a little less than 5 minutes now, we have Neil Krause from Senior Sign. So join us for that in a minute. But thank you both. That was wonderful. We've had two great presentations in a row about, really actually improving day-to-day life of seniors. So that was wonderful. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
We just hit leave.
Thank you very much. See you again in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. See you in a minute.
Bye-bye.